Welcome to a segment we like to call What's Up, Doc, where we spend some time with the experts at Mercy Health. They don't always have to be doctors. We've talked to people who are in the fundraising realm of things, who do a wonderful job, especially around the holidays. And now we're going to turn our attention toward the topic of bereavement. And on the line to spend a little time with us and carve time out of his day, which we appreciate, is Joe Marek, bereavement coordinator at Mercy Health Hospice here in Rockford. Joe, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, my background is as a pastor. I've been a pastor over 40 years. I served congregations for 30 years. I was a chaplain with hospice for 6 years, and now for about 5 years I've been the bereavement coordinator. I work with a hospice team that cares for the terminally ill. So the interdisciplinary team of nurses, social workers, chaplains, home health aides, massage therapists, etc., they all take care of the people who are dying, but at the time of death, they pass the baton to me. And so my job is to coordinate the bereavement services that follow death. Medicare requires that we follow it up for 12, 13 months, so a full calendar year is my responsibility to contact them by the phone, mailings, provide celebration of life services, support groups, holiday remembrance services, any way that I can help in order to be able to get them through that first year.
Joe, there's a nice piece on you in northwestquarterly.com I'm looking at right here. I think it's from September.
Yes, thank you.
And you talk about you realized at a pretty young age you were not afraid of death.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I just grew up in a family that was, I remember very much dealing with the loss of loved ones. My paternal grandfather died before I was born. The year before I was born, my maternal grandfather died when I was only about 12. My dad died when I was young. People at the church, relatives, we always seem to be able to acknowledge the fact that death is not the end. And as a young child, I remember being strengthened by the idea that in the midst of what seems to be total loss, my faith, etc., was able to kick in and say that this is just part of what life is, and I was just comforted by the fact of having a good church home, parents, family units, etc., that just didn't perhaps over-exaggerate the importance of it all, but simply put it into its own context.
I've often thought, and having had experience 3 times at this point in my family with hospice care with different members, the people who were involved in it, you and the many others who do this, this is a calling. This is not a job. This is not an occupation. This is not a vocation. This is something you are called to do.
I agree with that. You know, I've said it many times when I talk to people that are nurses. They don't go to a store and buy the heart that they have. They don't go, the social workers don't go and pick something off the shelf and think, I'll be this way. These are people that I think pretty much are born to be this way. They just find a slot in which they can be able to be who they are, and their sincerity, the genuine skills that they have are just pretty impressive. So I agree with you. It's not really something you choose from a menu of job opportunities as much as it is you know who you are and you find some place that allows you to thrive.
One more question on your background, and pardon me if I'm being presumptive here, but the slight lilt in your accent here, from a little bit farther south from here? Where'd you grow up?
Let's go all the way to Texas.
Okay, all right. A little bit.
A little bit south of here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when'd you come up here to Illinois?
Well, I went to seminary in Chicago back in the 70s. Grew up in Texas, went to University of Texas, graduated Dallas and Austin, but went to seminary in Chicago and then began my ministry in Nebraska for 20 years. Came back to Northern Illinois and served congregations here before partnering with Rockford Health System and Mercy Health.
Well, and it's outstanding work you do. You know, I'm talking about this article on you in Northwest Quarterly, about 2,000 phone calls a year to check up on people. I know people haven't made that many calls in a decade.
I know, and it's not really something that I would have thought that I would end up doing. I'd much rather be a person in the moment with people, but because of COVID, et cetera, the vast majority of what I do is stay in touch with people over the telephone. I've learned to appreciate that that's perhaps one of my gifts. I would have thought that I would spend so much time on the phone, but it's what I do. And what I do, I think, is to be able to help people, and that means a lot to me.
You mentioned COVID, and that's thrown a monkey wrench into pretty much everything. How has it affected what you do?
Well, it completely affects everything. Maybe not so much me, but all of the rest of our staff, obviously, are limited as to who they can see. They're restricted from seeing people at all sometimes, such as our massage therapist, chaplains perhaps. So they have to really work creatively to find out how to care for people. I think COVID is such a mysterious, unpredictable, unknowing thing that in many ways it sort of mirrors what grief is. When we lose something, we begin to grieve and mourn, and we don't really know exactly what's going to happen next. We just do the best that we can, and I think that's what's happening with COVID. We go from day to day, week to week, month to month, and it's treacherous. It's a wilderness that is very difficult, but together we can get through it.
You mentioned how COVID's affecting how you're operating and relating with your patients. Do you feel, or do you find, is there some sort of sense of guilt now with some members of the family that they maybe they can't be at the bedside, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guilt is going to be something. It's not everything, but it's going to be certainly something that people have to deal with. I always try to listen as much as I talk when people talk about guilt, because they're probably the most infuriating thing that you can say to someone is why they shouldn't feel guilty. It's common. It's universal. It's natural to ask yourself, what could I have done differently? So I try to encourage people to talk about those feelings, but then to be compassionate with themselves. Other people are not going to understand their guilt. They're just not. Everybody's guilt is, or grief even, is going to be very unique. So I think that the point of someone feeling guilt is that it's just unresolved. Something is just not right. They're derailed. They're off the tracks, and they usually just need to have somebody to be able to talk it through.
So then I guess that leads me into the next question. How do you know the difference, or how would someone know the difference between, I guess, for lack of a better term, because normal is an odd term, the normal feelings of grief and loss, as opposed to really unbearable sadness and the fatigue and all that it brings with it? How do you separate that?
Well, that's really a really good question. I'm right off the top of my head, I remember that Alan Wolfelt, Wolfelt, is one of the leaders in the area of grief counseling, and he points out things like, for example, if you're responding to people who are offering you comfort and support, that's normal. But if you get to where you're not able to accept it, that's moving towards a little bit more of a different kind of depression. If you are openly angry about things, that's very, very normal. But if you are so upset about things that you don't know what to do with that anger, it comes out inappropriately, it's a little bit more than the normal grief. A couple more. If you can relate to your depression, if you can use the words that you want to use, that's probably normal to struggle with exactly how to say it. But if you are so upset about something that you're lashing out at someone else, you may even have a pervading sense of doom, just a chronic state of emptiness, you're complaining all the time, then we're dealing with a different kind of grief. So I would say that grief where you can express your sadness and emptiness, you can deal with that with people, you can talk with people about it, is okay. And then my job is to assess whether or not they're kind of incapable of getting on with the rest of their life, and they kind of get log-jammed into that depression that is pretty obvious. Now, I'm not licensed in that area, so I use a very, very strong list of people that I can refer to for that.
You bring it back to COVID and what you just talked about there. Is there people are obviously depressed and anxious about what's going on in the country right now, and when you have the death on top of it, is there a way for people to separate why they're feeling the feelings they're having? If this is a COVID related depression I'm going through, or this is a bereavement depression I'm going through. How do you talk through that?
Well, once again, I have to listen. I go into every conversation with someone with absolutely no blueprint. If I listen well, they'll pretty much serve up exactly what it is that they're concerned about. With the pandemic, there's just such a cocktail of anger and frustration. They may direct that towards a facility or to even the politics of the situation. But I think what's important is that the people can realize that whatever they're struggling with is going to be something that they can process, provided they have the conversation. I'm just a big, strong proponent that you need to have somebody in your life that you can talk to. The walls so often are just not helpful to us, and we need to be able to have somebody. and it's going to be what I call someone who loves you. Whoever that person is, they don't have to be anything other than someone who loves you. Is going to be a person that you need to talk with about that. I remember talking to someone recently who said the phrase, I wish I could have held the hand of the one who held me at birth. That's the sadness of what's going on. The sadness develops into fatigue, the fatigue develops into exhaustion, and they just don't know where to go because COVID has deprived them so much of the rituals that we associate with saying goodbye at the time of death.
Yeah, you're denied closure in a lot of cases for whatever the word closure means to you.
Totally. I was recently asked to go over to one of our facilities and lead a prayer service outside the building through a window. The deceased is on the other side of the window. The nurse is inside. The family's not allowed to be there. It's just a little bit surreal to realize that this is the way we're handling death right now, rather than a year ago where we would have visitations and funeral services, graveside services, memorial services, celebration. We really do have a very sophisticated way of saying goodbye, and that's been taken away from us right now.
I'm sure it's not a one-size-fits-all, but what's the standard length of counseling that you have with a certain people? Is it 2 weeks? Do you have something to go months, years?
Well, I would say that for me, like I said, Medicare requires that I have a very, very sophisticated way of following up for 1 year. It's interesting. It's a roller coaster. Early on, they may want to talk to someone, and then later they kind of move on. Other times, they don't need anybody now, but 6 months later, when that birthday rolls around or a holiday or an anniversary of some sort, they do need to talk to someone. So we take very seriously that it takes that full first year of things happening, the calendar year, to be able to completely assess just what it is that these people may have. Now, I always offer people the opportunity to contact me even after 12 months. But it's really, really important for people to know that there are things available to them, even if perhaps right now they're not taking advantage of it. I've kind of used the example that it's always nice to have some food in the cupboard at home, but that you're not going to eat it all the time. You just like to have it there when you are ready for it. So I think that it's going to be important that the counseling part of it, if it's going to be general follow-up and general conversation, is something that I can provide. If they're looking for someone to meet more regularly with, whether it be monthly or weekly, every couple of weeks, then I would refer to a counselor.
And before we let you go, Joe, just to end on an up note here, what do you recommend as far as maybe a mental technique, maybe a way of establishing some perspective to lift your spirits a bit? Yeah,
it's a great question. I'll go back to the first thing I said, and that was you just have to be around people who love you. This is not a time for you to try to mend bridges. You're going to have some people in your family that try to help you, but they're not helping you. In fact, they may make things worse. So allow yourself to be first right now. Make a priority of yourself to be around people who love you. And secondly, do the things that bring you joy. That's not selfishness. You need to be able to find those kinds of things in your life that give you the joy that you have missed. When you have some strength come back to you, you're going to have some healing. When you have some healing, you're going to have some peace. And then you'll realize that a lot of the sadness never really goes away, but it diminishes over time. And with that diminishing, it'll be filled by a little bit more of the joy that is going to be a part of the rest of your life.
Joe, you're a fascinating guy and probably one of the most well-spoken people we've ever talked to. For people who have been listening this morning and would like to reach out and make contact with you, how do they do it?
Well, I say to everyone, you need to call simply the hospice program. That is my number. May I give you that number now?
Sure.
Yes, 815-971-3550. You can ask for Joe. You can ask for Joe Marek. You can ask for the bereavement coordinator, but the one who answers the phone will direct them to me. And I will take very seriously as I would a shepherd for a flock. I mean, everybody's important to me. They don't know that yet. But usually through a conversation, we can help people. In fact, I am very, very confident that the resources that I have available to me will always help someone.
You talk about someone essential to society's function. I would argue that your position is one of those very essential ones.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you.
Joe, thank you for taking time out of your morning with us. We really, really appreciate it. Best of luck to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for the time.
It was our pleasure. That's Joe Marek. He's bereavement coordinator at Mercy Health Hospice here in Rockford.